Okay, this video is about fake religions and molestation in the Catholic Church. And it's very unfortunate, but it has gone on. Nobody's really said anything about the Catholic Church and how they have issues with their religious beliefs and why the Roman Catholic Church still struggles with sexual abuse scandals. So this is in USA Today Network, and this is very recent. This is actually August 17, 2018. And so it's a woman that's pictured here who was sexually abused by a Pennsylvania priest, doesn't think the Catholic Church will make any changes after the release of the grand jury report. And so this is Julian Bortz, who was abused in 1965, and says she struggles with her religion every day. Okay, I'm going to say right away that I've shared some of my views on religion, and I know some people believe it. Some people believe it because they grew up in it. I had family that grew up in it, and one while I was going, but I don't believe any of it. And I have my reasons, and this is but one of many issues right here. I really don't believe that these religions are genuine, or the people that carry them out, rather, they're not genuine. And I really don't believe in these religions. I feel like there's a lot that is used in these particular religions in America that has caused a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, and a lot of confusion for a lot of people. And people have to work that out within themselves and be honest to say that the organization that they're a part of may not be a good environment, a safe haven as you thought it was. And so a lot of people don't really like to talk about things like this because it dredges up, bad memories of some childhood abuse that happened right in the church. And I believe a lot of people who come to these religions are coming because they're looking for a place of refuge, a place that is safe, a place where they feel that they can be loved. And if they're struggling with addictions, if they're struggling with family problems, money problems, a lot of those things that you struggle with on a day-to-day basis as being a human, some people will go to therapy, some people will maybe take even medication that's prescribed by a doctor, and then other people find religion and they feel that maybe there's another place where they don't have to feel pain and suffering, or they don't have to go through some of the oppression that they deal with on a day-to-day basis, being a person of color or a minority classed individual, or whatever struggles that you have that are personal, be it physical, emotional, or mental, psychological, and on down the line. So a lot of times religion sort of serves as a buffer for some of those issues that people deal with or struggle with. And a lot of times what happens in these religions, you have people who orchestrate and organize these religions, and a lot of those people have their own personal agendas, be it to cheat poor people out of their money, sleep with people that are in the church, take advantage of people because they have blind faith in something that nobody really knows if it really exists. They just assume that it does because it's an old book that they refer to, and they think somehow some smart individuals put a bunch of stories together and you have to follow it. And the people that are telling these stories, the people that are organizing these groups and putting people together, can you trust them? And so these are all the questions. There's many other questions. And so this article talks about the Catholic Church and their problems. And lately we've been hearing it's sexual abuse, and it dates back many, many decades. And so from what I know from the Catholic religion is that I attended a Catholic school at one time. And, you know, I never had any of these issues happen to me because I didn't stay with that particular religion. As of now, I'm not involved in any types of religion. I don't believe in any of it. And I know that there are other people that do. And if you do, I respect you if you do. But you have to respect me because I don't. And so I know some people want to align themselves with something that they feel is going to bring them out of a miserable state, or maybe bring them to a higher place in life. And if it works for some people, then it does, I guess. But there's other ways of finding um, a place where you feel comfortable, even if you can only trust yourself. And a lot of times people will find solace in other ways. It doesn't have to necessarily be a religious organization that's been organized by people. And people, what are people best known for? Not being perfect and making a lot of errors. And some people's errors are a lot more, um, how would you say, bigger than others. And that's my way of putting it. And sometimes you can forgive errors, and other times it takes time to forgive those errors. And then other times some people can't really find it in their heart to forgive people because they've been hurt so bad. And a lot of people say, oh, forgiveness is not for the person that hurt you, it's for yourself, so you can release yourself from that pain. But it's not as easy having to do so. It may sound easy for the person that's saying that, but it depends on what kind of abuse that person has endured. So a lot of people don't understand being raped, being molested, somebody giving you a disease, somebody impregnating you against your will. Those are not things that you're just going to forget about and be happy. And so it's going to be eating away at you for a long time. Some people don't ever get over things like that. And it depends on how traumatic that incident was. And so some people just don't get it. If they hadn't experienced that trauma themselves, they think people can just somehow shake it off and have a smile on their face. And being tough and being strong doesn't always mean forgetting about some of the most traumatic times in your life. A lot of times people heal when they actually find a way to express their pain in a positive manner and talk about it. And maybe the way of dealing with it is to not forgive the person who perpetrated that trauma against them. Maybe avoiding people that you see have the same characteristics, because it can happen again, or someone else can come in your life and create that same kind of pain or worse. Sometimes talking about it releases a little bit of whatever it is that is bothering that person, because some things are easier to say than actually do. And if a person has been beaten up, if they've been molested, if it's gone on for a period of years, and you realize that you've been traumatized, a lot of times people aren't able to get over that type of pain. And so unless you actually experienced it yourself, then you have to realize that some people's way of dealing with it is through addiction. That's why some people end up on drugs, because they're trying to medicate the pain. And it's not, it may go away temporarily, but it doesn't completely go away. And no going to a church to find this sky god is not going to cure it. And what people don't realize, the molestation and the pain could have happened right in the place that you're directing them. So a lot of people don't understand why some people are not a part of these religions. That might be why. They might have been raped by a pastor. They might have been impregnated by a pastor. They might have gotten AIDS, or they might have gotten HIV from the very pastor. The one you're directing them to is the one that caused the most trauma in their life. And so you got to watch what you're doing. And the people that do this, they're not really as religious as they claim to be. And, you know, this article is really sad. There's multiple articles about the Catholic Church. And so it's really sad because these people are suffering, and they've suffered for decades behind this. Now, what I do know about the Catholic Church is that they bury and hide things. Now, the Catholic Church is not the only one that does this. There are other religions. The Black community has problems where there's this thing called prosperity preaching, where preachers will come in and they'll preach to a poor congregation and people who are in need, and they're seeking some kind of refuge and trust. And the very reverend or pastor of the church, basically, they live in a nice home, they drive a nice car, they're well taken care of, and then they pretty much siphon money out of poor people in that community who are struggling next to nothing. We've had a lot of those incidences. And so a lot of these churches, a lot of these religions sometimes create more of the pain and suffering than helping. They create more of the problems. So in an internal diocese memo from Erie in northwestern Pennsylvania, a priest admitted to being aroused while tutoring a boy, hugging him, and sharing sexually suggestive text messages with multiple boys. And so okay, here. I'm going to continue on reading this, but I just want to say that a lot of these people who start spouting off about God and religion don't realize who they're doing this to. You could be resurfacing old wounds and not even realizing that you're doing more harm than good. They're thinking, oh, this person is just an atheist. They just hate religion. You don't know. The person, it may have been a victim of this very thing right here. There are many people who have been through this. And so that might be why people don't want to be bothered with this anymore. You can't push somebody. It's like you've been raped and you've been beaten and you've been abused by this child molester. And you got this person who's saying, oh, go back to that person. They're not going to hurt you anymore. And when they go back to that person, that's the very person that does the same thing or worse and puts more trauma in their life. And so the priest bishop admonished him to cease and desist. But the Catholic Church leaders didn't pass that information along to the authorities until 6 years later. And only then, in response to a grand jury subpoena, the Reverend David Poulson resigned from the diocese this past February, 3 months before he was charged with sexually abusing 2 boys. And so Poulson's case is an example of how abuse and cover-up continue to plague the Catholic Church. And so this has been a huge problem And it's not just the Catholic Church, let me tell you. There have been other churches that aren't Catholic that have the same issues and other issues where people are sleeping with one another's wives and husbands. People have caught diseases. There's extramarital affairs that result in children being in the picture. And you're wondering, wait a minute, how come you're married to her and you're married to him, but you've got the pastor's, you're expecting the pastor's baby, and you have a different husband. He's got a wife already, but he's married to somebody else. What's going on? There's lots of stories, and it's really sad. So the Reverend, his name is David Poulsen. So he resigned. It says Poulsen case is an example of how abuse and cover-up continue to plague Catholic Church. Even after the issue first exploded into the national consciousness some 16 years ago in Boston. So since then, the church has vowed to make improvements and paid out billions of dollars of parishioners' tithes to victims. Okay, so in March, the Vatican Tribunal found that the Archbishop of Guam, Anthony Apuron, guilty of certain accusations involving the sexual abuse of minors. So in July, Pope Francis accepted the resignation of the retired Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, the former Archbishop of Washington, D.C., who is alleged to have sexually abused a minor 47 years ago. And in Pennsylvania, Poulsen was one of the 301 predator priests identified. Listen to the numbers, people. 300. Not 301 predator priests identified in a sweeping grand jury report released Tuesday that detailed child sexual abuse in 6 Pennsylvania Catholic dioceses and religious leaders' efforts to cover it up. These are people that people have trusted for years, traditional beliefs, traditional marriage, wait for, your husband, wait for your wife, wait for the right mate to come along, wait to be involved intimately with your significant loved one once you get married. And all of these people that went to these organizations, which is an organized religion, 301 predator priests were running amok and raping not only probably girls, but many of them were boys. Many. And so you also had religious leaders. Now, it didn't say just a regular leader. Religious. Listen to that. They were religious. Religious leaders who made all kinds of efforts to cover things up. No, they didn't right immediately when they knew something was wrong, try to get these people out of there. Root those bad weeds out and pluck them and get rid of them. Get them out of there. No, they covered it up. Even if they weren't involved, you might as well have been involved. For example, look, I'm just going to make this as an analogy. R. Kelly is doing all of this stuff to women, and you had all these other people that were key players involved in this. They might have not have touched the women or participated in the sexual acts, but they knew it was going on, so they're just as guilty as he is. Just because they weren't in the room or they didn't touch anybody, from what I heard, they actually trained the women what to do. And so this is the same deal, but a little bit different. This is actually sad because, see, those people weren't claiming to be religious. These are supposed to be people that every family member is supposed to have some type of trust. And if you can't trust your neighbors, if you can't trust people on the street, you seek refuge with religion. And so you can't even trust these religious leaders because they work hard to cover up all of this molestation. The investigation identified more than 1,000 victims. There is an entrenched infrastructure of secrecy in the Catholic Church. Now, this is what I was telling you about, that there's a lot is usually buried or hidden. And it doesn't come out unless they want it to, or unless somebody that was a victim has had enough and the pain is so great emotionally, they finally decide to come forward and speak on it because they can no longer endure this emotional pain that they've been fighting all these years of sexual abuse in a most trusted organization that you feel like was a family tradition. And so here it says, the church that continued to reward concealment rather than disclosure, said co-director Ann Barrett Dole of bishopaccountability.org, a group that collects data and researches sex abuse in the church. Much remains hidden still to this day about clergy sex abuse across USA. Yes, America, which doesn't surprise me. That is why the Catholic Church continues to struggle with it even today. And so most of Tuesday's grand jury report, one of the most extensive public accountings of abuse within the Catholic Church to date, deals with events before the early 2000s. And the report points to the promising sign in the past 16 years, saying victims are no longer quite so invisible. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops adopted the Charter for the Protection of Children and Young People in 2002. So it set procedures for addressing allegations of clergy sexual abuse of minors and came in wake of the Boston Globe's investigation into priest abuse and the ensuing national crisis. Still, the scandals and cover-ups have continued. After all this is coming out, you still have people who work hard to cover up more of what has gone on. Now, tomorrow will be Sunday, and I see so many people rushing off to go to these churches amidst all of this chaos that we're hearing about, hoping that there's a better life in the spiritual sense. But there's so much chaos and so much that is being unleashed. It's ridiculous. And so in multiple states, the church has resisted efforts to reform statute and limitation laws to allow people abused that were abused as children, sometimes decades ago, to seek compensation through civil lawsuits. So it prevents more victims if we get exposure, said Florida lawyer Michael Dolce, who is a child sex abuse survivor himself and an advocate for Florida to repeal its statute of limitation for such crimes. It raises the information in the community as a whole by exposing the secrecy. And so the grand jury report and Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro were critical of actions the church took since 2012. So in 2012, a victim inspired by the revelation of abuse in the Boston Archdiocese reported that a priest in the Allentown diocese abused her. So the district attorney didn't pursue a criminal case, citing the statute of limitation, and the diocese and its lawyer attempted to undermine and discredit the victim and her family, according to the grand jury report. So June of 2002, the bishop in Erie Diocese wrote to a victim that he was shocked the victim would go to the press directly rather than contact me regarding the past. Okay, so he basically, he knows what he did, but he doesn't want this person to tell. So he'd rather them call him first. Like that's going to make it right. So in 2013, Greensburg Diocese received email from a victim concerned after seeing photos of a priest on a parish website, even though the priest was dismissed from the church a decade earlier following multiple complaints of child sexual abuse. So in 2014, Harrisburg Bishop Ronald Gaynor wrote to the Vatican to recommend that one accused priest not be removed from the priesthood, even though he was taken from the active ministry. So Gaynor wrote the priest that the priest should be permitted to live out his remaining years in prayer and penance without adding further anxiety or suffering to his situation and without risking public acknowledgement of his crimes. So they feel more compelled to protect these predators than they do the actual victims. And so they go beyond and above to protect these priests who have molested for decades, and still some people are hiding what all has gone on. There's probably a lot more victims, and probably even some of the stuff that we're hearing is probably still happening. And it's being swept under the rug or hidden away or buried. People are given hush money. So in 2014, Harrisburg Bishop Ronald Gaynor wrote to the Vatican to recommend that one accused priest not be removed. Can you imagine that? They're protecting them more than the victims. That's sad. So in a statement, I'm jumping over, after the grand jury report, the Harrisburg Diocese said that the letter didn't accurately represent the action taken and was not part of a cover-up. So only when they've been forced again into a corner are they doing the right thing. State Representative Mark Rossi, Pennsylvania legislator who testified before the grand jury as a cover-up as the Pennsylvania legislator who testified before a grand jury as an abuse victim said Wednesday in a radio interview, without the grand juries, they would still be doing exactly what they have always done, he said. So Hillary J. Scarcella, who studies sexual violence and trauma as a doctoral candidate in theology studies at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee, said that the church needs to put concerted energy into an external, independent analysis of what has enabled this problem for so long and then systematically clean it up. I think at this point, the Catholic Church has shown itself to be incapable and untrustworthy of managing this problem on its own. Scarcella said, so they need outside folks to come in and they need to be accountable to victim-centered experts to help them deal with this. And so that's pretty much, and then here's photos Bishop holds Mass of Forgiveness in Harrisburg. Here they go with the forgiveness. Show your support for abuse victims. White ribbon, and I can't see the rest of it. There's 26 photos, and so I'm going to flip through them. Okay, so this is Irene Youngman of Hershey holds a box of white ribbons that parishioners could wear to support the survivors of clergy abuse outside of St. Patrick Cathedral prior to the Mass of Forgiveness in Harrisburg on Friday. Excuse me for the dogs. Somebody around here has dogs. Neighbors have dogs, so that's what you hear. Any talking, those are neighbors. The Mass was part of the church's ongoing need for repentance and healing. And so I'm just going to flip through the pictures here. You're going to hear a lot of dogs because somebody's doing something. But anyway, this is pictures of the service. Do you see how the people are still very loyal about coming to these churches? And who knows what this man has gone through? He might have been a victim. I would assume he might have been a victim because the way he looks, he does not look happy at all. Looks very sad. And you don't know who to trust. This is why I said you don't really know who to trust anymore with these religions. And she's a woman prays before leaving the church following the Mass of Forgiveness at St. Patrick Cathedral in Harrisburg on Friday, August 17, 2018. So this was very recent. The Mass was part of the church's ongoing need for repentance and healing, according to the Diocese of Harrisburg website. And so this is bad right here. It's like, anyway, that goes on to other stuff. And so I'm going to end this video because of crazy dogs. But anyway, it's sad, but this is happening. So the reason why I did this video is because, I do a lot of videos and a lot of things are focused on the African American communities and the Black communities, if you want to say, if you will. It's the same. But also, there are Black people that are Catholics, but most of the people that I've been around that I've seen normally that go to frequent the Catholic Church are Hispanic community or white. There are Black people who attend Catholic churches. There's a Black community of Catholics also. So, and people from other backgrounds who attend Catholic church. So it's not just, but the majority of people that I see attend these Catholic churches are Mexican, Guatemalan, Salvadorian, they're from the Hispanic communities. And then I'll see some white people attending these Catholic churches. And most of the time it'll be like white people, or a large percentage, even in the Los Angeles area, will be the Latin community or Hispanic community that attend the Catholic churches. And so whenever there's talk about, Black churches, and you shouldn't think that, it's just happening in that community because they have so many problems. Well, look at this. White people go to Catholic church, Hispanic people, people of color go to Catholic church. So primarily the Catholic religion is not as huge a religion for the African American communities, but there are African American nuns, there's priests, there's also people that will attend that are African American, that are African peoples that are Catholic. But all these religions, I really feel like they're not really They're not really, organizations that you are to be trusted. Now it's nice and quiet after I want to end the video. But anyway, it's just, I feel like people just don't get it. They don't understand that it's not about these buildings and these books and these churches and these organizations. It's about the people. And you have to be careful who you entrust, who you trust, who you put your confidence and your belief in. A lot of people are going to these churches for different reasons. Some really are looking for a way for a better life. That's not everyone. Some are looking for a husband. Some are looking for a wife. Some are looking to create problems in those organizations, such as this right here. Some feel like they'll use this to their ability as a weapon. And if it can get them rich, they can siphon money away from poor communities. They can manipulate people because people are blind followers. It's like cultish, where you can manipulate people's minds to believe in something that really isn't, and use Bible scriptures and use it to your benefit to take money from people or take sex from people, rape people, hurt people, cause other people's lives to be miserable, catapult yourself to a status where you're looked at more as a god rather than this entity that people believe in. And so a lot of it is just as bad as this. I'm going to flip over really quick there was some, I don't know if you've seen this or not, but I'm going to type this in here. There's actually a church, and there was something where they were putting up a statue, and this church is under fire. It's called the Satanic Temple's Baphomet statue, and it travels to Arkansas's Capitol building. And so it's a satanic goat idol that completes a 3-year journey to Arkansas's Capitol building. And so there's a lot of people upset over this. And so, some people will say, oh, the devil is busy and the devil's in the church and he's infiltrating the church. And so I'm not going to read all about this, but there's video on it if you want to see it. But this also is really crazy because, let me see here. It says a bronze statue, just a little bit, a bronze statue. This is by A.V. Silk. And so a bronze statue of a satanic goat monster, Baphomet, was unveiled Thursday at an Arkansas Capitol building in front of a cheering crowd of free speech activists and a smaller crowd of unhappy people holding handwritten Bible verses. And so the nearly 8-foot-tall statue brief public appearance marked the culmination of a 3-year effort for the Satanic Temple to bring it there. Below is the story of Baphomet's journey to Little Rock, told with as many sinister goat images as possible. So Baphomet was born in Detroit. Well, technically, his history dates back to the 12th century Europe, when the Catholic Church accused blasphemers, which is ironic, right? After what I just read about the Catholic Church, blasphemers of worshiping the idol, according to the BBC. So whether any Satanists actually did worship Baphomet is an open question, and he didn't acquire his popular goat human avatar until an occultist author made it up in the 19th century. And then somewhere in Detroit in the summer of 2015, this happened. So there's a video on it. I'm not even going to show that. So the Satanic Temple's 1-ton is a 1-ton bronze coated rendering left of the Baphomet traditional hermaphroditic breast and added two little kids at the sides to make the statue more publicly palatable. And so palatable or whatever, the temple hoped to install it next to the Ten Commandment monument at an Oklahoma capitol. And so this is right now, this has got a lot of people pissed off. And so this is the statue that they put there. It seems very demonic, and it has a negative history behind the whole thing. And also the sexual priest, the Catholic priest. And so I'm bringing all this up because I don't believe in any of this stuff. None of it. No, I don't worship satanic idols either. I'm not into that. I'm not into none of this crap. I think all of it is man-made ideology, and it creates a lot of confusion, a lot of pain, a lot of anger, a lot of suffering, and it does more work to upset people and divide people rather than bring people together. It is supposed to have brought people together, and it's supposed to create fellowship, and it's supposed to be a place of refuge, a place where you're supposed to be able to trust people and all your problems. You're supposed to cast your cares upon the Most High, supposedly. Okay, here's the deal. I do believe there's a possibility that there could be some wonderful, miraculous entity that we as man cannot explain, but it isn't any of this stuff that people have been blowing out of their, blowhole. If it's so great, none of us have seen it. None of us can explain it. None of us know what it is, if it even does really exist. And I believe that people can find spiritualities in other ways that are positive, and no, it's not in worshiping demonic forces either. And so I'm not promoting anything like that. I find that there are other ways you can do things where you don't include all of this craziness. And I really believe that a lot of this was given to slaves and to people who are the masses, that they knew they were going to be discriminated, or they're going to be poor, or they weren't going to really have a lot of resources. So they had to give them something to rely on to benefit the time that they're here, so they can get through their drudgeful life. And so make the best of what you don't have, basically. And so the times that we're living in right now are times of economic oppression. And so people are now being economically enslaved, where you're relying on government assistance. You hate this government and the way it's set up because it makes you feel trapped. And you have to rely on people who are bad people who call the shots, and they can give you more help, or they can cut your help. And we know where that comes from, like all these services and some of the much needed things that people need, like health care and schooling and food, just some of the basic necessities. And whenever somebody has that much power that they can just pretty much pull the plug on all of that, it creates a lot of social divide and anger and resentment, because you have no control over these things unless you just go out and work even more hours like you don't already. Some people are the working poor. They work a lot of hours and don't make very much money, very much income. And so you rely on all these services. So you're thinking, well, with all this hard work I'm doing, let me go to a place so I can vent my frustration, so I can find a place of solace, or a place of repentance for all the things that I've said and done, that maybe that's the reason why I'm not able to be successful and have a better life. No, it's just because there's a system in place where there's some people who, they have a tremendous lot of money and they're greedy and they don't want to share. And you got your Bible, and they got their money. And so this is the kind of stuff that I don't align myself with. And so you got this sexual abuse in these Catholic churches that has dated back from decades, probably stuff, more things that people haven't even shared, don't want to share, but it's hidden away, buried away. You know, it's not just the Black community that struggles with, you know, dishonesty in churches. There are other church organizations and groups that aren't honest, where they, you know, mistreat women. They think it's okay for the husband to beat up on their wife. You know, you got to keep the woman in line. Some of that stuff, all this stuff you're hearing about this domestic abuse, it starts from these organizations right here, because they use the Bible to justify why they had slaves, why they have people that are poor, why they have peasants, why there's somebody in power, why somebody, you know, has to do all of this beyond and above. He's going to be rich. Oh, they say that they have some scriptures about what happens to the rich man, but you don't really hear that as much. We're in a time where the rich man is basically doing the reverse. He's coming to these neighborhoods, and basically all the people who are the working poor, people who have lived in communities all their lives, are being reverted further out to areas that they are not really well equipped, or they don't know, or they're not familiar with, and having to drive hours just to get to work into the cities that they've lived in all their lives. Simply, they can't afford those rents. That's what's going on. And so we have some people here who have fat pockets, deep pockets, and they're not willing to share anything unless they get more money in their pockets and they get some kind of write-off. You know, they just keep getting richer. And I'm hearing that they're supposed to get tax cuts and breaks, but there's no break for the poor people. And apparently these churches are not giving folks breaks either. They're giving you misery. And so this is what's happening here. It's not just happening in what we thought it was the Black community. You know, they put a label on it, slap a label on it, like dysfunctional. Well, look what's happening right here. Look at this. Roman Catholic Church struggles with sexual abuse scandals. This is dating back further, even further than the 2000s, the early 2000s. People who were kids and now they're adults. There was some man I saw like about a week ago, and he looked like he was well into his, his 60s. And he was talking about his abuse that he endured from the Catholic Church. That's how far back it goes. Maybe even further. I wouldn't be surprised. But anyway, I'm going to leave this video go. But I know I've talked my head off on this one, but it's just sad. I really don't trust any of these groups. These are organized religion. And like even in the Black communities, you know, some of your pastors and your preachers, they were pimps. They were hustlers. They were players. They were the Mac daddies. And so they found a new hustle. You know, let's pimp the congregation out. And apparently the Catholic Church has definitely showed itself out to do that in such a way that it's sexual abuse scandals dating back decades. So with that being said, people, you got to really be careful what organizations you join, because you don't know what you're getting involved in. It could be more problems than you know. And so who wants to go through this? Who wants a life of, you know, hiding the sexual abuse just to say, oh, I'm going to this church and I'm a devout Christian, but you're really hiding something that you're not the only one hiding it. There's been many people hiding it. And for these churches to support the criminals that are in here, that are supposed to be pastors and reverends, they're protecting them more than they do the victims. That tells you what times we're living in here. It's always really been like this. It's just now everything's being uncovered because people are tired. They've had enough of this. I believe this is the reckoning. It's you see all these people, they're miserable, they're tired of all this abuse and oppression. So they're showing you what they're tired of. Because people won't listen when you tell them. They think you're crazy, or they make it seem like it's your fault, or you're just exaggerating. So now you have many people coming forward, showing you what they've been through. There's proof of what they've endured. But yet, you're going to see the same people go to Sunday service like none of this ever happened. And the abuse and the misery continues on. Thanks for listening.